Hi, this is Vanchika from Hyderabad Urban Lab, and you're listening to your weekly city playlist, the first that's coming in 2017. The first track that I'm playing for you is in response to a bummer I made in the last week's playlist. So we were playing a tribute to those who have given us music to live by. We played George Michael, we played Leonard Cohen, but I forgot to play Prince, and I know I must get this right. So I'm putting on track one of his acoustic sets, starting with Cream. This played on VH1 MTV Unplugged in 2004. It's titled Prince, The Art of Musicology. Also in today's playlist, there's a lot of art because we are continuing our tribute series. And as we have lost another writer on art in the week gone by, we want to revisit their work and celebrate what they've left us with. So we're going to talk about that and a lot more, but before anything else, the error that I must correct. Here's playing Prince, The Art of Musicology. I'll see you after the clip.
Yeah, help me out.
This is it. Time of you to go to wild yard. You will hit cause you got the burning desire. It's no time. You will hit cause you got the burning desire. It's your time. Got the horns of why don't you blow it? It's your time. You feel It's your time. You feel the cute, baby, you know it. Cream, get on top. Cream, you will cut. Cream, don't you stop. Cream, trouble get by. You're so good, baby, ain't nobody better. Yeah, so you should have.
You know I wrote this while I was looking in the mirror, right? I'm serious.
You're so good, baby, ain't nobody better. So you should, hey, never ever go by the letter. It's so cool, everything you do is success. Break the rules, break them all, cause you are the best. Yeah, yeah. Cream, get on top. Cream, hey, cream, hey, cream.
Okay.
So last June when an old man ran away, she couldn't stop crying, she knew he was gone to stay. Yeah, it's 10:35 on a long Friday night. She's standing by the bar, yeah she was looking alright. Yeah, I asked her if she wanted to dance, she said that all she wanted was a good man wanted to know if my daughter was qualified.
Y'all want the chorus?
Say, I said, no.
Oh.
I know what's on your
Remember that from high school? Check this out. This is what I remember from high school. Ladies,
I'll love you anyway, even if you cannot stay.
wait now. Want to hear the first song I learned? On the guitar.
Left a good job in the sea.
For real. That's it. That's it. That's all I learned. Once you could do that, you could impress folks. I went from that to this.
Sometimes it snows in April. Sometimes it feels so bad, so bad, so bad. Sometimes I wish that life was everlasting. All the things they say never last. All the things they say never last. Love, it isn't love until it's had.
Thank you.
Welcome back. You're listening to your Weekend City playlist, and this is our tribute series. Last week, we lost a prolific artist, John Peter Berger, who I have no competency to describe, but purely for the purpose of protocol will recount as a multifaceted poet, painter, art critic, and novelist. His essay on art criticism, Ways of Seeing, was crafted as an accompaniment to a BBC series and is often used as a university text. And what I'm going to play for you is him in conversation with another terrific writer of the 20th century, Susan Sontag. And what they share is their admiration for arts, photography, and their love to disagree with each other. And that's what I find most beautiful in this clip, the brilliance and the composure with which they contradict each other, even when they're talking about experiences as up close and personal as their experiences in the country, in the city, or in transit, shaping what they think about storytelling, about this delicate yet immense need for the fantastic. I'll see you again in about 15 minutes, and in a world that's not taking to disagreements that well, here's our tribute to the art critic and storyteller, John Peter Berger.
If I think of somebody telling a story, I see a group of people huddled together, and around them a vast space, quite frightening. Maybe they are huddled against a wall, maybe they're around a fire. And somewhere for me, in the very idea of the story, there is something to do with shelter. The shelter, perhaps, of the voyager, the traveler who has come home, who has lived to tell the story. Or the soldier who has come back, who has survived. So there is this almost physical sense of shelter, where the story represents a kind of habitation, a kind of home. But then, inside the story, there's another kind of shelter. Because what the story narrates and tells is sheltered within the story from oblivion, forgetfulness, and daily indifference.
But you're talking about stories in a very remote kind of society that's quite different from ours, because surely storytelling is much more diversified in the societies that we know. Parents tell stories to children. Children ask for stories. We experience stories mediated through images, as in television and movies. We read stories in print. I think that the most archaic definition of storytelling, it does tell us something about, we imagine where storytelling comes from, but it doesn't tell us very much about what stories have become, I think, or what the challenge of storytelling is now.
Yes, I agree. But I'm not certain that something of that primitive origin doesn't remain. For instance, when children hear stories, or when we were children, and they told us stories, when does it happen? In bed, in this strange no man's land between waking and sleep. And in that telling of a story, or listening to a story, there is something reassuring. And very curious, because the more exciting, the more threatening the story, the more reassuring it is. Why?
But John, don't you think that people make a distinction between a story that is true and a story that is imagined or invented? I'm always struck by the fact that there's a kind of ambiguity in the very notion of storytelling. On the one hand, we think of storytelling as a truth-telling activity. Tell me the real story. Mm. We think of stories as bringing information. We think of stories as revealing secrets. Stories, true stories that might be told after someone's death, because, for instance, the death of someone is generally an occasion for telling stories about a person's life, and maybe some truth comes out that wasn't discussed or generally shared before that person was gone. But we also think of stories as, that's only a story, or don't tell me stories, meaning don't tell me lies. And don't you think at the very center of the whole enterprise of storytelling, there is the fact that storytelling is an activity that faces in two directions. On the one hand, it's connected with an idea of truth. On the other hand, it's connected with an idea of invention, imagination, lies. One is thrilled by the story precisely because it describes something that can't happen. It's connected with fantasy. I think it's also so complicated, and the model of the voyager or the returning soldier who is telling what really happened, who is bringing exotic news and telling terrible stories generally, is only one model of storytelling.
Yes, yes. I don't want to insist too much upon that. And probably those stories were very embroidered. Yes, the story exists somewhere between fiction and truth. I agree. If I think now, straight away, of my own personal experience in telling stories, or writing stories, I think they begin off, for me, and they have to begin off, as truth. For instance, I won't tell you the whole story, but
Yes.
a little one. A man I knew in the village where I live, a shepherd with about 100 sheep. And he fell in love. Fell in love with a woman, married, not from the village, from the town. A long love affair, well, for a couple of years, very passionate, probably with the complicity of the husband. And the woman, well, he gave her many things. Half of what he had, at least, including a house. And then she turned him out. And he decided to die. He didn't kill himself. He went on a kind of hunger strike. And then he died. When I think of him now, I can see his face, his very large hands, his eyes. That was truth. Then I tried to write that story.
And then you started inventing.
I started inventing, but in relation to the truth. But, if it worked, I don't know, this story will be read as fiction. And it will be read as fiction about a story of more or less unrequited love. And why will it be fiction? Because it will exist both everywhere and nowhere. And it is that displacement of place and time which makes something fiction, it seems to me.
But why would it be read as taking place everywhere and nowhere? Don't you situate it in the village where you live?
For me, it's situated in the village. But as soon as one reads a story, when we read other people's stories, we have an idea of that place, but it becomes part of our experience and therefore is displaced from where it really took place. I mean, it seems to me that fiction is something which exists, which goes beyond its immediate time or its immediate place. And it's exactly that which makes it fiction, or what we call fiction.
I don't have that experience, I think. Well, of course it's true that I'm not where the story is taking place, but if you're talking about some kind of traditional storytelling which is grounded in a particular place, if I read a story of Tolstoy,
Yes.
I think I'm in 19th century or early 20th century Russia. I don't think it's taking place everywhere.
But it applies to you and your experience of life.
Not necessarily. No, it might instruct my experience rather than apply to it. I mean, I'm not looking to see myself projected in stories any more than I'm trying to express myself when I write stories. No, I don't think stories are necessarily universal because they're read by very different kinds of people. Some stories, because the most powerful form of storytelling is very compact, and if it's very compact, it's likely to be very economical in its details, and therefore this economy can be experienced by us with our modern ways of looking at things as something abstract. And in that sense, it may take on a certain universality. But I think it is the particularity of storytelling and the fact that we now have available to us stories from every part of the world that fascinates us. And I don't ask that the story address my experience. I ask that my experience, so to speak, make it possible for me to understand the story.
Yes.
I'm not looking for myself in the story. I think I have maybe another way of looking at it from you, because I really start not from the oral tradition, but from the literary tradition. If I think of storytelling, let's say the parent to the child now usually in our society is reading a story rather than telling a story. We have so many stories available to us. In fact, sometimes people say that we have a surfeit of stories, which is why storytelling is often thought to be in a state of crisis. And so my model is originally a literary model, and I'm a city dweller. And you're someone who has lived a large part of your life, though you grew up, as I understand, in London, in a peasant community in the south of France. And therefore you feel closer by choice, because you've chosen to live there, to another, what many people would think of as an older form of storytelling, which is oral. And you have the stories of these people's lives whom you come to know. And you want to tell their stories to other people, because there's, I think, an ethical assumption behind your work that there are stories which have not been told, certain kinds of people and certain kinds of experience which have not found voice. And you want to give voice to or experiences which are neglected, or regenerate or revive certain forms of storytelling which are neglected now in favor of perhaps more sophisticated, city-oriented, print-oriented kind of storytelling. I mean, isn't that what you're saying? When you told this fascinating story about the shepherd and his unrequited love and his kind of suicide, the reason you wanted to tell this story is that you were moved by him, and he was a kind of person that perhaps you don't find in our literature as much anymore, although obviously there are. I mean, one only has to go back to Hardy, if not to other examples, to find stories of that kind, but perhaps they're not told today as often. And so don't you feel that some stories should be told rather than other stories? Isn't that behind your attitude towards storytelling?
I think it's less, perhaps it's less sociological than that. It doesn't really concern me whether that kind of story exists in literature or not. If I'm very, very honest, I mean, it is because that life was lived, I see a kind of meaning in it, and I would like to retain it, so that it is not lost, not forgotten. I mean, whether we're telling stories in a city context or in a village, probably you'll agree that, in fact, stories begin at their end. I mean, in life. I mean, the story of Romeo and Juliet, in a sense, begins at their death. That is when the story is given form. The end is not always death, but it quite frequently is.
That's a point I think that's worth talking about, why death seems the natural end of a story, and in the most traditional form of storytelling I think that it is. Is it because a death is the natural end of a life, and what stories are about are lives? You see, I think they're about much more than that, and but that is certainly one model of storytelling, to tell the story of a life, to give the value of a life in the form of a story which has its natural end as a death.
Welcome back once again. You're listening to your Weekend City playlist, and in this tribute week, we are remembering artists who've made life slightly more bearable, more beautiful, and sometimes challenging for us. Our next tribute is for the veteran artist Om Puri, whose contribution to Hindi cinema, as unparalleled as it is, dates back to 1972, where he acted in the movie adaptation of the Marathi play Ghashiram Kotwal. Multilingual, ranging from Marathi, Punjabi, Malayali, Telugu, Kannada, English, and Hindi, what I'm playing for you this week is his clip from Gulzar's Maachis, where he is in conversation with Chandrachur Singh, and what follows this clip is another of his recitations straight from the film Ardha Satya, released in 1983.
मुल्क सेल्फ सफिशिएंट नहीं हो गया, हाँ, कुछ लोग जरूर सेल्फ सफिशिएंट हो गए हैं। बिजली, पानी, घर, दवा, कानून, शिक्षा, कौन सी चीज है जो आम आदमी को नसीब हो गई है? 60% लोग अभी भी गरीबी की लाइन के नीचे हैं, और वो सिर्फ गरीब ही नहीं, बदनसीब भी हैं। 40 साल से ऊपर हो गए आजादी मिले हुए, आधी सदी, हाफ अ सेंचुरी। कब तक चाहते हैं इंतजार करें?
चीफ के ऊपर भी कोई है जो ये मूवमेंट चला रहा है?
कौन सी मूवमेंट?
यही देश की, धर्म की, इसे क्या कहेंगे आप?
देख बाबू, जब किसी आदमी के साथ बेइंसाफी होती है ना, और होती चली जाती है, अकेले वो लड़ नहीं पाता, तब वो अपनी तरह के और लोगों को इकट्ठा कर लेता है। कभी मोहल्ले और शहर के नाम पर, कभी जाति या धर्म के नाम पर, देश के नाम पर। लेकिन उसकी लड़ाई होती उसी बेइंसाफी के खिलाफ है। जब चाहो इतिहास उठाकर देख लो, यही होता रहा है, यही होता रहेगा।
तो फिर कानून किस लिए है?
कानून से कभी मसले हल हुए हैं? सुनते हो ना, इंक्वायरी कमीशन, इंक्वायरी 10 साल 20 साल चलता रहता है।
तुम्हारा मतलब है ये जंग कभी खत्म नहीं होगी?
अभी तक तो नहीं हुई है। मैं किसी आने वाली नस्लों के लिए नहीं लड़ रहा हूं। मुझे अपना हक चाहिए, और वो भी मेरे जिंदा रहते हुए, अभी इसी वक्त। चक्रव्यूह में घुसने से पहले कौन था मैं और कैसा था, ये मुझे याद ही ना रहेगा। चक्रव्यूह में घुसने के बाद मेरे और चक्रव्यूह के बीच सिर्फ जानलेवा निकटता थी, इसका मुझे पता ही नहीं। चक्रव्यूह में घुसने से पहले कौन था मैं और कैसा था, ये मुझे याद ही ना रहेगा। चक्रव्यूह में घुसने के बाद मेरे और चक्रव्यूह के बीच सिर्फ जानलेवा निकटता थी, इसका मुझे पता ही न चलेगा। चक्रव्यूह से बाहर निकलने पर मैं मुक्त हो जाऊं भले ही, फिर भी चक्रव्यूह की रचना में फर्क ही न पड़ेगा। मरूं या मारूं, मारा जाऊं या जान से मार दूं, इसका फैसला कभी ना हो पाएगा। सोया हुआ आदमी जब नींद में से उठकर चलना शुरू करता है, तब सपनों का संसार उससे दोबारा देख ही ना पाएगा। उस रोशनी में जो निर्णय की रोशनी है, सब कुछ समान होगा क्या? एक पलड़े में नपुंसकता, दूसरे पलड़े में पौरुष, और ठीक तराजू के कांटे पर अर्ध सत्य।
With this, we come to the end of this week's playlist and our tribute playlist series. I'll see you again with a fresh concept for your city playlist next week, which means that I am requesting you to tell me if there is any music that you think is not playing in our weekend city playlist. Is there something that you would want to listen to? Any particular concept, any particular thematic, any particular genre, any particular time in music that you want to go back to? Until then, I'm leaving you with a Baloch folk song which sounds very similar to a number that you may have heard in Bollywood. We thought the folk singers must be given their due. This is Vanshika from Hyderabad Urban Lab, and I hope to see you next week.